I want to know who is to blame for the fall of the Western Roman Empire. And in this video I want to speak about the beginning of the end of the Western Roman Empire. And I want to explain what I mean by the Roman Empire was rotten from the start. What I mean is that the Roman Empire had problems from the start. Before Alaric invaded in the 400s, in 395, when Emperor Theodosius passed away, there were big issues between the Roman East and the West. People agree that the Western Roman Empire started to fall in the 400s, when Alaric attacked Italy. But we need to recognize that there were problems even before Alaric invaded. And the books that I'm going to use heavily are Italy and Her Invaders by Thomas Hodgkin and The Tragedy of Empire by Michael Kulikowski. But before I quote them, this is what you need to know. In 395, Emperor Theodosius passed away, and he left the empire to his two sons, but they were too young to rule. Therefore, power fell into two men, Rufinus and Stilicho. Rufinus had control over the Eastern Roman Empire, and Arcadius, who was 17 and the elder son of the Emperor Theodosius. Meanwhile, Stilicho had control over the Western Roman Empire, and Honorius, who was 11 years old, and the younger son of Theodosius. It is clear that these two men had a power struggle between each other, and that was a reflection between the power struggle between the Eastern Roman Empire and the Western Roman Empire. Let's see what Michael Kulikowski has to say. I quote, "No one disputed that Honorius was commanded to their care by their dying relative, his father Emperor Theodosius. But Stilicho claimed, perhaps quite truthfully, that Theodosius had commanded both Arcadius and Honorius to his guardianship, and the same thing was publicly stated in Ambrosius's funeral speech for the dead emperor. Yet, Stilicho's claim could not fall to provoke the hostility of Rufinus, who controlled the Eastern Roman Empire. It is clear that Stilicho wanted more control over the East, and he wanted that through Arcadius, and Rufinus didn't want Stilicho to gain more control over the East. Then you have one person who wants to gain more control and another who wants to preserve it. Clearly you have a conflict of interest. So we can see that the two most powerful men in the empire were struggling with each other. And that is a big issue. Let's see what Thomas Hodgkin has to say. I quote, "One thing is certain. The animosity existing between Stilicho and the successive minister of the Eastern Empire, an animosity which does not necessarily imply any fault on the part of the former, was one most potent cause of the downfall of the Western Empire. In part this was due to the peculiar position of the military affairs at the time of the death of Theodosius." So here we can see that there are clearly problems between the East and the West, and even Thomas Hodgkin recognizes that those problems exist, and those problems are a big cause of the fall of the Western Roman Empire. But he blames the peculiar position of the military, which is interesting. Let's keep reading. "The army of the East, the backbone of which was the Gothic auxiliaries, has just conquered at the river Frigidus. The army of the West, which similarly depended on the Frankish and the West German soldiery. The two hosts concile in devotion to Theodosius. What does that mean for us? For the fall of the Western Roman Empire, what that means is that this Germanic military was pretty much following Theodosius, but with no Theodosius, then we have a problem. Who are you going to follow? Or in other words, who are these Germanic people going to follow now that Theodosius, the emperor, is no more? They were perhaps ready to follow the standards of a rising general, like Stilicho, but they were not in great haste to march off to wearisome sentinel duty on the frontiers of the Persian or Scythia, nor was Stilicho anxious to scatter them. In other words, there was a vacuum leadership in the Roman army when Theodosius passed away, and it seems that Stilicho is going to take that role. But he needs to keep the army together, and probably Rufinus, knowing this particular fact too well, perhaps wants to separate the army and diminish Stilicho's ascendance. Hence, heart burnings between him and the Eastern court, and complaints, perhaps well-founded, made by the latter, Stilicho, that he kept all the most able bodies and warlike soldiers for himself, and sent the cripples and good-for-nothing fellows to Constantinople. So Stilicho is not a little flower, he's not a little angel. He wants to keep every soldier that he can and all the most able bodies. So he's not stupid, he knows where the power lies. And that is a problem, because Rufino knows that. Again, friction between the two most powerful men in the Roman world. Whatever the original grievance, for a period of 13 years, from 395 to 408, hearty cooperation between the courts of Rome and Constantinople was unknown, and intrigues that now are impossible to unravel were being woven by the ministers of Arcadius against Honorius, perhaps by Stilicho against them. The Roman Empire was a house divided against itself, and it is therefore no marvel if it is brought to naught. We can clearly see there are problems in the empire. Stilicho wants more power. Rufinus wants more power. There are problems. The empire is rotten. And that is even before Alaric is going to enter into the picture. In the next video, I want to speak about Alaric, the barbarian who sacked Rome. I just want to finish with some questions. Whose fault it is that the empire is starting to fall? That these divisions in the upper levels of the empire exist? Was Emperor Theodosius at fault for dividing the empire into two? Was it his fault to not clarify, or pretty much state, if Arcadius was under the care of Stilicho? Is Stilicho at fault? He already has one, and the other one is quite older. Isn't it a little bit of a stretch to ask for both of them? Is Stilicho's fault for wanting to keep all of the troops? Maybe even a compromise would have been better than what he is doing. Is it Rufinus' fault? Should he accept that Arcadius is under Stilicho's guardianship? Should Rufinus let Stilicho keep the biggest army? And the influence of the two sons of Emperor Theodosius, I want answers to these questions, because I want to know who is to blame for the fall of the Western Roman Empire. In the next video, I am going to speak about Alaric, the barbarian who might be more reasonable than you think.